I want to have a purpose in life. Mm-hmm. I'm not ready to retire. I don't think I ever will retire. Mm-hmm. First of all, I'm an entrepreneur, so it's not like I work for somebody and say, oh, by the way, I'm 65, I got to go.
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to work. So what motivates me is just fun and working on some new projects, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And this is, involvement is everything. It's very, mm-hmm. very important to be engaged. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hi, it's Erik Weir, and welcome to another episode of Stuttering Your Way to Success. And today, my special guest is Henry Horowitz. Henry, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Great. Thanks for being on our show. So Henry is a philanthropist. He's an investor. As you'll see, he's lived various parts of the country. He's helped to develop something in our town called Artisphere, which I'm a big fan of. So what brought you to Greenville?
Well, I came to Greenville because I had a real estate company based in Oklahoma and Texas, and a firm based in Greenville bought the company, and part of the arrangement is that I come to Greenville and work for the company.
Mm-hmm. What got you into real estate?
Ownership?
In ownership, correct.
Right. Well, before we were providing third-party services, property management and leasing, mm-hmm. in Oklahoma and Texas and mm-hmm. Arizona. Mm-hmm. And then as we were performing these services, we felt, well, perhaps it's better to own it than provide services. Because with services, you only 30-day notice, right?
There you go. That's right. That's right.
So we start buying shopping centers and then office buildings. Mm-hmm.
So was there a thing that you looked for? Many people who watch the show say they may want to buy a rental house or convert it to a VRBO, which is a big trend at this time. Were there things that you look for in real estate that I want to buy this over another property?
Well, the old expression is location is everything. Mm-hmm. And the fundamentals of the property have to be there before we buy anything or we bought anything. Mm-hmm. Well, what I mean by fundamentals, again, location, the demographics, the merchants mix, if it's a shopping center, mm-hmm. and of course the overall economy of whatever the area that we buy the property in.
Is it important for the area that you invest in to be growing, or can it be of such size that it doesn't matter if it grows or not?
Most of our properties, with the exception of a couple areas, are already established areas. So. Okay. I don't want to be pioneer with the arrow on the back, so
right.
So we buy pretty much an established area.
So when you watch the news today, you hear about the Federal Reserve trying to fight inflation. You saw the interest rates come down with COVID to rates we haven't seen really ever, and then trillions of dollars of financial stimulus put into the U.S. economy, and now we are fighting inflation we haven't seen in 40 years. What does that do to real estate, and does that create opportunities in your mind?
Well, it all depends how you position your real estate to start with. Those who have borrowed money on a fixed rate several years ago, they're doing fine. Mm-hmm. But those who have a floating interest rate are struggling. Mm-hmm. But in terms of acquisitions, a lot of things have been put on hold, mm-hmm. simply because it just doesn't pencil out. Because one, if the interest rates are at 7% and you buy on a capitalization rate, let's assume you buy a 6 mm-hmm. cap rate, mm-hmm. I don't want to confuse anyone, mm-hmm. Then the spread is not that much. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting side. We have a home on the coast, and we're building a guest house, and I've asked our builder several weeks ago, and I said, how's the rise of interest rate? But this is residential now. Mm-hmm. How the rise of interest rate affecting your business? And they're a very prominent builder mm-hmm. in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And he says, interesting you said that. He says, primary homes, people are still proceeding with building primary homes because that's where they have to buy. I mean,
sure, they live, right?
Yeah. Right. Whereas we had 14 contracts on second vacation homes. Ooh. Everything's on hold.
Really?
Because most people who have either build or buy vacation homes mm-hmm. Second homes have mortgages. Mm-hmm. And the rise of interest rate and rise of insurance cost it's not as palatable to a
Sure,
lot of people. So
sure.
just really from a residential point of view. Now,
Please keep going.
from
Yeah.
a commercial point of view, the debt issue obviously is very difficult, because we also involve in medical facilities and mostly investment grade health systems. So there's not an issue whether we're going to get the rent payment. These checks arrive on the first.
Right.
But if you want to buy something right now, the seller still demand low cap rates, but yet your interest rates are very high. So it's very, very difficult to make the acquisition justified. And we've always been disciplined in terms of.
Sure. So what is it? So if you have a seller who at present is reluctant to adjust the price, and buyers who are reluctant to meet the seller's objective, how does that resolve itself?
Well, it depends on product type. So I was referring to medical facilities. Again, that's a more institutional type of business. There still will be growth because at the end of the day, I mean, if you borrow on a short-term basis, hopefully interest rates get decreased and you're not taking that much risk, theoretically. But where you buy a strip center or an office building, I can't speak to multifamily, then the risk is a little bit higher because you don't have investment-grade tenants, obviously, or credit tenants for the most part. They're mostly small shop owners. So therefore, if there's a recession, then chances are they may not survive.
Right, right. How has COVID changed real estate from your perspective?
We owned many shopping centers in 6 states. It did not affect us whatsoever. And because we have what I call utility shopping centers where these are basic services or goods that people sell. We didn't have high-end retail stores.
Do you see the work from home or the flex week where some people would work 2 days from home or 3 days from home? Do you think that's here to stay? And if so, do you think that affects, say office properties?
Well, I think it is here to stay, probably maybe modified to a certain degree. I have my CFO, and she lives in Dallas, and it takes her an hour and a half to travel to our office, and she has a young child.
Oh, wow.
So what I've done, since she can, being a CPA or CFO, she can do business out of anywhere. All she has to do is get on her computer or laptop.
Sure.
And so I made arrangements with her that she works 2 days a week out of the house,
That's fantastic.
which is Monday and Friday.
So it helps, yeah.
Well, plus
Like a 4-day weekend.
Well, right, but she still does work.
Sure.
Right, she still delivers at the end. You have to deliver it.
Correct.
But what makes it is that she truly appreciates that, and because that helps her lifestyle, and therefore it creates a great loyalty and work ethic and everything else in there.
I was reading earlier this week about the great layoffs that are happening, and you see layoffs. Google's laid off, Amazon, just about the Facebook, a lot of like now Meta, and you're beginning to see that in other areas. And what some people are saying is they were laying off some of the people who had the more flex weeks. And I don't know if it's more from you don't have to see them as much, or it's easier emotionally or practically, because many people have said the experience of the flex worker has been positive. What's been your experience with the flex worker?
Again, I don't have that much experience in that, but I can relate to. So it's interesting. In our shopping center business, I was telling several bankers for some reason they want to know how my shopping centers are doing. That interestingly enough, over the course of the last several years, even COVID times, or even right now, our occupancy is at high 90s, and there's no delinquency.
Wow.
No delinquency.
Wow.
I mean, literally no delinquency.
That's fantastic.
One of the reasons is because we don't inflate our rents. We're a long-term owner. When you're a long-term owner, you think differently. In other words, we don't flip properties, and we don't increase the rent so we can, drill.
Right,
So we,
right.
as a long-term owner, you have a different strategy in terms of
Right.
how you deal with the tenants.
No
Since
doubt.
we're a long-term owner, we think long-term. So
Yeah,
we'd rather have the
right.
tenants survive than not.
Correct. Yeah, I had several friends in real estate who went and stopped rent for a period of time during COVID, and the people all made it up. He said, but the loyalty that created was substantial, where other publicly traded companies were reluctant to do so. Then they ended up ultimately facing vacancies, re-tenanting, and actually in the long run, it cost them money, and also it cost reputation and relationships.
Eric,
So
as
it's
you know,
interesting.
this business, I'd rather have lower the rent than have the space vacant because all the tenant improvements, commissions,
Right.
downtime.
Oh.
Actually, you wind up paying more money.
100%. Well, you're obviously a very accomplished business person, but you've also been a philanthropist, and you've been very active in arts. And one of the things I was reading in a real estate course I took some years ago was a quote by Michelangelo, and I didn't realize this, because there's 4 things that a city needs. It needs water, which Greenville has a river. It needs good food, which Greenville now had. When you came here, it didn't have to talk about what it was like when you came here. That's really
It's a
interesting.
desert.
Yeah, it's right. And it needs music, live music, and needs art. So you seem to have an affinity toward art and the arts. Would you talk to me about Artisphere and some of the things?
Well,
you
I
see
mean,
in
I got
Greenville?
involved in the arts when I lived in Oklahoma City. And I'm fond of saying when I was 28 years old, chairman of Ballet, Oklahoma Board of Directors. He was chairman of a major oil company, and he called me up and he says, "Henry, would you like to join Ballet, Oklahoma?" I go, "Well, I don't know. I don't like to put tutus on, but but I mean, sure, why not?"
Right.
And he says, "Well, Henry, you're going to be doer, giver, or getter." I said to him, his name was John. I said, "John, well, I'm 28 years old. I'm certainly not going to be a giver."
Right.
And I may be getting, but most of the time I will be a doer. And he says, "Henry, we don't need doers. That's the staff for
Oh, you're a getter or a giver?
doer, giver, or getter."
That's right. Yeah.
Which is a great. That's when I get people on the board of directors.
Yeah. That's what you tell them.
I ask them which one you want to be, but the most important one is you got to be giver and getter.
There you go.
So in any event, this is how I got into the arts, and then. And I got involved in a lot of arts organizations in Oklahoma City. In several of them, I became president. So in Greenville, when I came to Greenville, many years later, I became chairman of Metropolitan Arts Council. And then mayor, there was 2003. Mayor Knox White said to me, "Henry, we just closed down this arts festival that's been in business for many years, but it's really more a fair than an arts festival, rides and
Right.
yeah. So he says, "Would you, Metropolitan Arts Council, consider starting a new festival?" And I told him, "Well, that's not the business we're in right now." But I said, "Let me think about it." And I was involved in Oklahoma City Arts Festival, which was a major festival. So what we've done is taken best practices. I call plagiarism, but best practices from the Oklahoma City Arts Festival, which was the opening night, as you've been to, and other things. And so it took us 2 years to come up with a business plan, form a important board of directors, and on which you served on, and get a support from both the city and the county and the state financially. There's a lot of, as you know, a lot of whether it's for-profit or nonprofit initiatives fail because they don't have a good business plan, or that can be executed, or they don't have the financial support. It's
Right.
just basics.
Right.
So, so our first festival started in 2005, and amazingly, next year we'd be facing 20th anniversary. But we just been named one of the top 7 festivals in the country out of 650,
Wow.
which is, I always say, small Greenville. And the reason is because we treat our artists well. We provide them with 3 meals a day. We provide 500-600 volunteers, as you probably know. So artists rate us from the way we treat them, and it's like any customer, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so anyway, so we became one of the top festivals in the country, which is amazing only for such a small city, relatively speaking.
What type of economic impact would an Artisphere have on a town like Greenville or city?
Well, interesting. I was chairman of South Carolina Arts Commission, which is a statewide arts agency, and it just issued literally a week ago economic impact for the state, what arts do for the state.
Okay.
$18 billion.
I would not have guessed that in 20 guesses. $18 billion.
Well,
That's
I mean,
fantastic.
Spoleto, Artisphere, but also just from so many different levels of economic
I can
impact.
see that, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
payroll,
Yeah.
hotels, visitors, everything else in it. So Artisphere, we think has probably, Carrie Murphy was our executive director. She says you always exaggerate, but but I think it's probably $15 to $20 million economic impact.
I don't doubt that at all. I know I grew up in South Atlanta, in Fayette County, Georgia, and at that time there were no studios at all. I mean, for many years, and they passed a bill with tax credits for filming in Georgia, and now there are more there's more episodic content shot in Georgia, theatrical content than in all of California. So it's interesting how that changes the economic impact that has been significant.
Well, but a lot of it's lifestyle,
Correct.
Often when I tell the governors, for Mark Sanford and Nikki Haley and present Governor Henry McMaster, so it's not just the economic impact, but it's also the lifestyle. People, come to a city or area because it's the arts, as you mentioned initially, right?
Right.
It's not just people want to come to something that they enjoy and listen to or see it or whatever. So anyway, lifestyle is very important too.
So we had Mayor Knox White on recently. He's the mayor of Greenville, South Carolina. Has been for like 25 years. To my memory, the longest standing mayor.
22. Yeah.
Or 20, for that many years. You moved to Greenville. Was it
92.
92. How has it changed, and what do you think were the big catalysts for the change?
Well, interesting you said that. So when I came 92, I told my wife that she better learn how to cook because there are really not that many restaurants.
Right.
But what we've seen, because we've taken a tour of the area, how beautiful it is. And so I think the catalyst for change of Greenville is first of all, city has done a great job, in my opinion, in terms of public-private partnership. As you're probably aware.
Right.
Very few cities do that for
That's
the
true.
most part.
Yeah.
And
Adversarial oftentimes.
Sorry?
They're adversarial oftentimes.
Right, that's exactly right. So the city's always been well known in terms of the support of private businesses or whatever other initiatives. The other thing I think the city, which is for somebody like me and perhaps for you, city welcomes your input. Where you go to other major cities like New Orleans or Charleston, they will say hi, but that's about it, right?
Right.
Whereas in Greenville, people welcome you if you contribute. I don't mean just financially, but just contribute.
That's actually true. Yeah.
Right? They welcome your
Nice
presence.
perspective. That's true.
Right. They welcome your presence, your input. And and that's probably one of the reasons a lot of people have living in Greenville and want to come to Greenville, because the way Greenville treats newcomers, in my opinion. Maybe I've been very fortunate, but we found nothing. I had an opportunity to move to New York when my company moved its headquarters back to New York. But we felt like Greenville was such a beautiful place. 45 minutes from the mountains, 3.5 hours to the beaches, and you got Charlotte, you got Atlanta, mountains. Anyway, it's just, it's
fantastic.
well located, great weather, relatively speaking, everything else.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. If you were to go back and talk to yourself, your 25-year-old self, what advice?
I talk
would
to
you give
myself
yourself?
often, though.
Yeah. You just can't say, "What did you say?"
But what was the question again, since I interrupted you?
If you were to go back and give advice to the 25-year-old Henry, what would you tell yourself?
Well, interesting you said it. I was giving advice to my son, who's 31.
Right.
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 From my financial point of view, tell him, I said, don't, of course, because he's always lived in I call it a bubble, right? So I said, so when he does financial underwriting and projections, he always feels like things are going up. And I said, well, guess what? Things happen. Right? I said, always assume the worst and hope for the best. He said, well, that's negative. I said, well, not really. That's realistic.
Right.
Number two, I tell him, use good judgment, whether socially or in business. I mean, just use common sense and good judgment. So think twice before you do something. And number three, obviously be very supportive of the community you live in and contribute as much as you can. So, I mean, these, of course, there's many other things, but that's just basics in there.
Yeah,
And of course,
that's
have good work ethic.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever had a point in time, and we talk about this on the show, Studying Your Way to Success, there's setbacks, there's failures, we've all had them. I refer to them as setbacks typically than failures, but have you ever had a point where you're ready to hit a wall, and you're like, I just can't take it anymore, I want out, and what was it that carried you through to the next level?
Well, yeah, I read your book, which I experienced some of the things you have experienced, and that's actually a very well-written book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And when I lived in Oklahoma City, it was late 70s and early 80s. As you remember, all in Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana, all boom became all bust.
Oh, that's true.
And it was a depression. I mean, many banks have failed, and just had a ripple effect across the economy. So I had I guess it's my favorite story, although it's not so much favorite. I had an office building called One Downing Place after a British Prime Minister residence.
Okay.
I called One Drowning Place.
One Drowning Place, right.
Because the major tenant left. It was oil and gas business. So,
that's bad.
I know.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I thought everything was great. So all of a sudden, the bank says, Henry, it's been nice, but come up with the money.
Right.
So that taught me a lesson that you cannot keep anything for granted.
That's true.
And a lot of people don't realize that sometimes. I mean, this was a severe recession or depression in Oklahoma and Texas and other areas. And so people who went through it wisened in terms of how you conduct yourself in business and essentially be conservative because you just never know.
Right. Yeah, I've talked to my kids frequently. I said there's two types of people. There are those who are humble and those who are soon to be.
That's great. That's right. Assume to be. That's right.
Yeah.
Of course, my wife says I have no filter. So
Yeah, that's right.
sufficient.
That's fine. We love it. We love it. That's fantastic. Who are your mentors, or who were your mentors when you're coming up?
Well, so one funny story. When I first started, after my graduate school, my first job was American Express Company.
Okay.
And I worked directly for executive vice president. So I remember one time, I was 25 years old. I came in from lunch, and I hear the guy report to come in and slam the door, and I said, I wonder what's going on. So his secretary calls me 20 minutes later, and she says, Mr. Healy would like to see you. And I go, what did I do, right?
Right.
So I walked in there, and he says, close the door. And maybe I shouldn't say this in this interview, but he closed the door. He says, are you married? I said, no, I'm not married. He says, well, don't. I said, why? He says, let me tell you about my wife. She just went to Bergdorf Goodman, and she bought a fur for $25,000 that was on sale. I mean, there was fur for $50,000, but she bought it on sale for $25,000.
Wow.
This is 74.
Oh, that's like.
So he.
Oh, wow.
And she says, well, it went on sale. And I told her, how am I better off? You just spent $25,000.
Right.
So he was my first mentor. He was so funny,
Yeah.
but he was very direct.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I thought it was pretty. So he's one of my first mentors in terms of business and how do you conduct yourself in a large public setting. It's American Express.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
My goodness.
so
It's bigger than that.
So, and I had several other mentors who were very good at the end of the day. And the key is to be a good listener. and see what people do and what people do wrong and learn from that experience. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
And you have that in your book as well. I'm not copying you, but I'm just saying.
Oh, thank you.
Plagiarizing you.
Oh, thank you. That's the highest form of flattery.
Right.
Thank you. What motivates you now?
Well, interesting is we were just talking. I want to have purpose in life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready to retire. I don't think I ever will retire.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I'm an entrepreneur, so it's
Oh,
not
sure.
like it's not like I work for somebody and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm 65. I got to go."
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to work. So what motivates me is just fun and working on some new projects, whether it's for profit or nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, involvement is everything. It's very, very important to be engaged.
What if someone's watching the show and like, man, I really like what you're saying, and some of the things about real estate I found interesting, or business principles. Are there any books you would recommend them to read, or any podcasts to listen to? Or
I'm sorry, I did not. War and Peace.
Yep, yeah, that's you can learn a lot from that as well. No doubt about
That's
it.
my favorite book.
Yeah.
I read it. Of course, it takes me 5 months.
It takes a minute to read it. Yeah,
takes me 5 months
it's
to
not a
complete
short
it.
read. Yeah, yeah.
No, probably the best thing to do is read. I'm a voracious reader of major newspapers, whether it's Wall Street Journal and New York Times. And I'm not talking about the politics. I'm talking about
Sure.
just
Yeah.
you learn a lot when you see all the events and everything else going on. So.
If someone wanted to learn and they said, "Hey, I'd love to be mentored by somebody," a big talk of these mentorship, you volunteering your time, go work for free for a period of time or a discount. How do you feel about mentorship?
I mean, I've done it several times.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So what was that like? And I mean, how did you find a mentor?
Well, I mean, it's usually a family friend, their son or daughter, mostly son, and they want to learn whether they can get in the real estate business, right?
Yeah, right.
And I explained to them as Ricky Ricardo says, explain to them that, again, just basics of any success is work ethic, which is everything in my opinion.
No doubt about it.
Work ethic and good listener, and at the same time learn as much as you can from financial aspects, because it's having background in finance or accounting is very, very important if you want to own your own business. And not speaking people want to own their own business. Some people don't want to be in a business. They,
Of course.
They do other things.
You've mentioned work ethic twice, and that's an important thing to you, obviously. What does that mean to you?
Well, work ethic means many things to me, but I always admire. Interesting. I sent a compliment to a chairman of a large bank here, the person I deal with at the bank level, and I said that particular person, number one, has a great sense of urgency and responding. Great communication skills, tries to address the things as soon as possible, but also, so I use that, or several other people I deal with, but to me, work ethic is really paying attention to what you have, don't postpone. One of the great aspects that I always give people advice is, I'm sure you do too as well, every Sunday I prepare my next week's agenda, what I'm going to be doing, my to-do list.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, I do handwritten. It's not,
Oh, yeah.
it's because there's nothing, and one of my favorite things to do is scratch out or mark off the things that I've done.
Doesn't that feel good?
Am I right?
Oh, yeah. No,
I mean, that's maybe old-fashioned.
No, I use paper. I
Yeah,
love
right.
It. Yeah,
I mean,
feel
so
better.
I prepare an agenda, and it's usually 3-page agenda because there's different segments, whether it's for-profit, family, business, or whatever. And so that's very important. That sort of guide you what you need to do.
I like it. So your system is 3 parts. We talk about it in the book, faith, family, fitness, finance,
Right.
friends. Everybody has a system.
Right.
Yours is 3, which is very good. So it's for-profit, business, and family. So you take time and plan some activities or I mean, what
Well, I
does it
just
look like
show up.
for
I
you?
don't plan on taking that.
Showing up.
Showing up is everything.
They
too,
say
right?
that's 80% of the battle right
80%,
there.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Pareto principle, 80%, 80-20. That's
No,
right.
I know. So, interesting. I have 3 grandkids, and so we babysitted 2 grandkids, which was not easy. But, yeah. So, listen, it's basic principles of any life. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just, I mean, it's just apply the principles and
Life not
and-
planned is
right, and stay away from social media. A lot of people are too much in social media. Maybe we're on social media right now.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what I'm saying.
They can be a
right?
lot, no doubt about it.
Yeah, some people reveal too much,
Correct.
and
Correct.
sometimes you don't need to know everything.
Right.
Less is more.
Right.
A friend of mine, I'm sure you've heard this expression many times. The only time you should be in the news is when you're born and when you die.
Right. That's
Right.
it. That's it.
And of course, that was a long time ago.
Right.
So, But I think it's a great. That's too much.
Of
but
course.
still.
But that certainly does make a lot of sense. You know, in your life, you've achieved a lot, and you've had some recognition. The Palmetto Award was given to you, I guess, maybe more recently, 2019, which is the highest honor someone who, as a resident of South Carolina, can receive as a civilian. Also, the Visionary Leader and Lifetime Achievement Award. So you've hit some accolades both in the nonprofit world, being recognized for contribution, in the business world, art. So what do you want to be remembered as, though?
Well, I think, frankly, what I remember is what I've contributed to the community, to whatever it is in there, and my friendships. At the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Right.
And how you raise your family.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, that's really what kind of legacy you leave for your children and grandchildren or whatever else in there. But at the end of the day, some people are not involved. You and I are very similar in ways. I'm being presumptuous that you and I are very similar, but we contribute to the community. Some people just don't feel comfortable, or they don't want to, or for whatever the reason is in that. So their life is really one-dimensional. Right? I'm not
Right.
saying it's wrong.
Right.
But it's one-dimensional. It's whether it's business or just family. Right. So it's nice to have a sort of a combination thereof. Makes your life richer.
Right. That's so true. Going back to business topic, when we were talking about the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates, and as a real estate owner, it's something to be mindful. 4.7% there-ish now. There was more economic reports coming out, and the market's kind of pricing in. I'm hearing 5.4, 5.5, higher than people were originally thinking, because there's still some resilience in parts of the economy. And yet we're seeing other parts of it kind of roll over or have a slowdown. So it's interesting to see. When you see things like that, I mean, obviously, if you have a secured debt, you're fine, and there can be benefits as well. But do you think we're in a recession? Do you think we'll go into a recession? The first part of the question.
Well, again, it really depends. Right now, we're very fortunate so far, is that personally, I'm not in a recession, although my wife's American Express sometimes makes me feel like I'm going to go into recession. Right? Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, but the reason is so far we're pretty fortunate because we're in the right locations. We are a long-term owner, therefore we have relatively low debt. And when you have relatively low debt, you can, a lot of things can be mitigated. But at the end of the day, I'm concerned that Federal Reserve, just be careful what you wish for. And when they start tightening up on so many things, and then when it affects the consumer debt, which or consumer spending, I mean,
Right.
consumer spending, I mean that's what drives the economy.
Right.
And when people, speaking of American Express, I got a statement of American Express. If you want to pay off this balance, it would be 28% interest.
Whoa.
28%
Wow.
interest.
That's remarkable.
So that means if
It's usury, right? Yeah. Wow.
a lot of people borrow money, right, as you know, and they're in debt, and they borrow money, make minimum payment, whatever. I'm just saying, with the higher interest rates, at the end of the day, that affects majority of the population.
Correct.
Right. So therefore, they're going to probably cut back on, and there's some people already cutting back on whatever the purchases are. And, it's a ripple effect. I've seen this drill before.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me. Not from an investment point of view, the same thing. And a lot of people also may not invest or buy things is because if stock market is down, right, people's perception of their wealth
It's down.
is stock market, correct?
Right. Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, and the average person doesn't have real estate other than home.
Right.
So that pretty much the entire wealth, or majority of its wealth, it's either home or the stock market.
Right.
So if the stock market is down, the perception that, oh my gosh, my holdings are down 20% or whatever the number is,
Right. Sure.
I better not spend. I just
Right.
give you what happened in single-family homes, where people say,
Right.
you know what, I really don't need to have secondary home.
Right. In your assessment, we've talked with other guests before, but it seems to like build momentum when that happens. It seems like when somebody slows down their spending, then that impacts, the home sales. That then home sales impact
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
construction materials, and things it starts to be, kind of a snowball, and then what is a catalyst usually that reverses that? Do things get so?
Well, obviously, one of the catalysts will be when Fed either starts slowing down in terms of interest rate or puts things on hold, because then it's a perception, right, that Federal Reserve feels like the inflation has slowed down a little bit. And but the problem with inflation is that not everything's inflated. Maybe food prices are.
Right.
Right, but in general, I don't see as much inflation. But again, I'm not your average consumer either.
Right.
So I am concerned that at the end of the day, sometimes it's like a roller coaster. When it starts going down, it really starts going down.
Right.
And I'm just concerned that be careful what you wish for.
Oh, no doubt.
So it's a very balancing act at the end of the day. So. I don't know. And one way we'll find out, since we're in a shopping center business, that's pretty quickly, you find out pretty quickly as to. So if people get haircuts every 3 weeks, they may get haircuts, every other month.
Right.
And
right.
I'm speaking as just, so that's a ripple effect.
No doubt about it. Do you think that recessions, they create opportunities as well?
Of course. When you have cash, a lot of liquidity, then when this is strictly from an investment's point of view, of course, right? Then obviously, if you have a lot of liquidity and good reputation with banks, then sooner or later, some of the properties, and I'm talking about real estate now, maybe go into foreclosure. Or the banks, or you may be able, some sellers may say, you know what, I'd probably be happy to sell you whatever you want to offer, simply because I can't afford to have, feed the property.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Just basics. And so those who have good liquidity and good cash available and all that, I think will probably benefit. And I see, because I'm in the medical facilities business, I see a lot of foreign money pledging equity because they see that they are prospective potential buys.
Interesting. I talked to a family office in Dubai yesterday, and they were preparing funds for what they think will be opportunistic, things that emerge.
The medical fund that we got involved in just got $1 billion equity commitment. Of course, that concerns me.
Right.
You know why? Because two ways of going out of business: no business and too much business.
Right.
And too much business, you can't put your arms around everything, as you well know, right? Either lack of capital or you can't stop falling through the cracks because you don't have the infrastructure to pay attention to all that.
Right.
So I've seen that drill before too.
Oh, absolutely. If you were going to go into business today and you're starting out, you're graduating from college or business school, or maybe you're in a mid-career, what would you recommend someone to do?
Well, it's interesting you said that. Of course, I'm a proponent of real estate.
Right, right,
So,
right.
I mean, I don't have a background in manufacturing or anything like that. So, speaking of mentoring, so I told several people who I mentored, because they asked me about the real estate opportunity, and I said, well, if you want to be involved in a business, assuming you have no capital, then become a leasing agent. Or I tell a story of a guy who's in his late 30s, who's in Dallas. He's a mortgage broker, places mortgages.
Sure.
He makes on the average $1 million to $2 million a year.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And all he does is maybe 5 or 6 deals a year.
And his personal risk is effectively
Zero.
zero. It's time.
Well, I mean,
It's time.
he's
That's
a
it.
broker.
Right.
So, but I mean, it's an extreme. But you know what? He has no equity,
Right.
no funds.
Right.
I mean, he's got one person who works for him part-time.
Right.
I mean, that's just an extreme.
That's a good gig, right?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah.
But I said being in a real estate business, whether leasing or sales or whatever, provides you pretty good income. But it takes time to get. I mean, it's not immediate.
Right. Have you seen I'm sure you've seen it. I don't know that you participated in it, but the rise of Uber. They don't own any cars, but they're the largest provider of transportation. Amazon. They don't have retail sites. Maybe just a few. The largest retailer. And today, VRBO is the largest provider of overnight stays, yet they don't have any of their own proprietary inventory. And people were buying homes now, and they're saying, hey, I'm going to rent it out for nightly or weekly. And the returns that they're claiming to get are much higher than you would get from typical real estate. So do you have any thoughts on VRBO? Or?
Well, I mean, we have several apartments that my son decided to be in the business.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm spending more time cleaning up
Yeah.
because you're dealing with people.
Right. Okay.
It's a different deal.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of fun, but not really.
Right.
But frankly, for your average person who wants to be in the real estate business, that's an entry level, right?
Right.
Buying a home for rent or
Right.
buying something like that. So it's a good entry level for somebody who doesn't have a lot of equity or a lot
Right.
of capital or
Right.
borrowing capacity.
Right. I've
I
heard
have
of
that right.
Right, that's so true. And I've heard of people who go near hospitals where the travel nurse is a big thing right now, or has been, and they make 3 times what a normal person makes in that job, and they'll lease an apartment in Boston near a hospital or Atlanta, and furnish it, and do 3 or 4 month leases, and charge 3 times the typical lease rate for a furnish and a short-term solution. So, with most things, when things are that good and that great, they kind of they cycle
good to
in
be
and cycle
true.
out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, but I mean, a lot of what I call concepts work simply because, again, I can't speak for Amazon because Amazon is such a different world, but Uber and others, they came up with a great concept. But frankly, the other competitors are actually not doing well, like Lyft. I don't know if
Right.
you heard.
Yeah, they're slowing down. There's
Yeah,
no doubt.
slowing down. So the question is, what's the delivery?
Right.
At the end of the day, what product or service you deliver?
Comes down to execution at the end of the day.
Speaking of Artisphere, one of the reasons we've done very well because we hired, the first person I hired, she was, you didn't meet her, but I might have had the vision, but that's about it. She executed the vision.
Right.
As you well know, at the end of the day, it's all about execution.
100%.
Everything about execution. A lot of people have a lot of great ideas, great vision, but they just don't get it done.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the visions, where you want to go. Mission are the steps you take to get there.
Right.
And there was Walt Disney who went bankrupt, with his dreams, and then he asked Roy to come and help him, his brother. When Walt and Roy worked together, it was magic. But neither one, they each needed each other. The tactician needed the visionary and vice versa. So that's good.
So I got to tell you a quick story. So when I lived in Oklahoma City, my wife says her friend her husband ran Sam's Wholesale.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's many years ago. And it just started, it was in the 80s. So anyway, so my wife says, why don't we go to Bentonville, where it's headquarters for. We were supposed to have dinner with this couple, and I go, Bentonville, I'm going to stay at a Holiday Inn.
Right.
It's not my idea. It's an 8-hour drive, right? So this couple called us just 20 minutes before we were supposed to have dinner. He says, another couple's going to join us. Sam Walton.
No way. That had to be an epic meal. Wow.
So he said something to me which I never forget. It's called the walking around theory.
Okay, man. Okay. Writing this down.
Walking around theory.
Okay.
So he says, unlike a lot of but this is early 80s, so it's a different world. Anyway, he says, unlike many executives, where they call the store manager or district manager, I'm going to be at the store at 8 o'clock on February 20th, right?
And they're all like,
I just show up,
Right.
with unannounced. And the first thing I do is go in and say hi to the store manager, and I tell the store manager, I don't want you to follow me. Do what you need to do. And he says, I go around the store. I go to the back office, the back, which is before the
break room.
well, before the distribution centers were formed, This is where all the check in the merchandise.
Right.
And I go to every department. I wind up with cashiers at the last. And cashiers tell me all the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to the store manager, so he doesn't tell me what I want to hear. I just heard what needs to be done. And I call it walking around theory. People walk around, in other words, take the time to go and see what's going on, right? A lot of executives, because they're too busy or whatever the level is, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
Huh? They just don't take the time to actually pay attention.
How can we be better? You can ask that. What's
Right.
broken?
Well, but to see it for themselves,
Right.
rather than hear what you,
Oh, yeah.
I know it's not practical. Now it would have been impractical for somebody like him to do this,
Correct.
right? But I never forget, that was a
Well,
great...
I'm sure there's a sample size that still would be representative of the
Right.
entire population. Now that there's a show called Undercover CEO, and the CEOs will dress with a mustache or different hair, and they will go into like a manufacturing part of their business, or they'll go and work in stocking or work in distribution. And every single time they find employees that are like wildly dedicated and just like, wow, this is an amazing person. And then they have those on the other side that are disgruntled, they're grumpy,
Right.
they're usurpacious. And then they find in every case there's something so obvious for them that needs fixing and repairing or restructuring or retooling. And they're so grateful they took the time. And they wouldn't were it not for the TV show of taking the time to go in, but they learned. So what you're saying, with Sam
But it's a
Walton
great concept, walking around theory, right?
It's a great concept. It's a great concept.
When I go to a shopping center, I walk around and I see weeds
Yeah,
right. But a lot of people don't do that.
right.
They don't take the time to,
And you never walk around where it's like,
right, it's always something,
there's always something.
always something.
Always
you know,
something.
But that's just, if any advice, I think it's a pretty good advice, don't you think?
That's very good advice.
I don't
Very
care
good
what
advice.
business you're in or what you do.
Yeah, very good advice. Yeah, I'm thinking right now, no doubt about it. Now, as we prepare to close, and thank you so much for your generous contribution of time to educate our listeners. If you were facing a problem today or an obstacle, fill in the blank, whatever it happens to be, do you have a methodology or a process you try to go through to get clarity and to get steps to put into action?
You talk about personal or business?
Say business. We say personal. Either one. Say business for.
Yeah, but business probably more appropriate. Well, I'm a strong believer in delegation.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, I always tell everyone, I don't want surprises. Tell me the problem. Give me a heads up. I don't want to, the worst thing you can do is me finding out before you tell me,
Right.
right? That's just basics, right?
Right.
So give me a heads up and just get it solved. And if you need help, let us know and we will do whatever we have to do. So to me, and again, it applies to the same things I talk about, sense of urgency, communication, right? And at the same time, also, I said, well, I don't want to be penny wise, pound foolish, but at the same time, just because you get one bid doesn't mean you take it. You always have 3 bids. I have a policy, 3 bids if it's possible, because you
Right.
never know, right?
Have you ever? The disparity is always remarkable, isn't it?
Right. But one thing that we deal with our people who provide services for our real estate, as you know, a lot of service. It's very important. I always say that we pay immediately. We always pay. There's no such thing as delinquent payment on anything we owe, because that's how we do business. But at the same time, we also demand great service, because we pay our bills on time, and reasonable cost. It's just basic. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody agrees to it, right? But if you have that philosophy, in other words, my philosophy and our philosophy, our family, we pay the bills immediately, immediately when it's due. There's no that's because you develop a reputation that you pay your bills and that you meet your obligations, right? Your basics, and that. But at the same time, you demand great service, and whatever else needs to be done.
Right, right. It's like they say, sometimes common sense is not as common as it once was.
You know, you just said it right. Common sense, and again, that's why I told my children, exercise good judgment and common sense.
Very good.
You can't go wrong. Do you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much
My
for being on my
pleasure.
show today. Henry.
My
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of Who's Eating Your Pie with my special guest today, Henry Horowitz. Thank you.